She said she felt safe by my side. And I remained silent not because I didn't know how to respond, but because my heart knew, in that second, that I felt much more than I should. And the worst part? The night was beautiful. The stars didn't need this. We kept walking. Our steps were at the same pace. But something between us had shifted, and I still didn't know if she had felt it too. If you've ever stayed silent because you didn't know how to contain what you felt, you're in the right place. Subscribe to the Another Flame channel right now. And tell me in the comments, where are you hearing this story from? It had been one of those days that leaves you exhausted in a different way. Not the exhaustion of having done too much. The exhaustion of having spent the whole day inside an office lit by artificial light, answering emails that nobody really needed to know, smiling at people I didn't really know. That kind of day leaves you hollow inside, as if you'd spent energy that didn't exist. When she texted asking if I wanted to go for a walk, I didn't even need to think. I texted yes, before I even finished reading the sentence. She lives 3 blocks from me. We've walked this route hundreds of times. At least that's what I'd say if someone asked. Actually, I don't know the exact number. I just know there's a crack in the sidewalk on the corner of Oak Street that we always avoid at the same instant without needing to warn each other. Our bodies learned this route together. I was waiting on the porch when she turned the corner, black jacket. Hair still a little damp. She must have taken a quick shower after work. There was something about that detail that touched me in a way I couldn't even explain to myself. The idea that she had prepared to walk with me, even if it was simple, even if that was all it was. The night in Portland was cold in that typical October way. Not aggressively cold. The kind of temperature that makes you want to walk closer. Put your hands in your pockets, breathe slowly to feel the icy air descending. The streetlights cast those orange halos on the wet asphalt. It had rained earlier. The smell still lingered in the air. We started walking around without much to say. And that was good. With her, silence never felt heavy. She was one of the few people in my life with whom I could simply exist without needing to fill the space with words to prove I was present. She asked how my day had been. I said, long. She said, I know. And that was enough. We passed the bakery that closes at 8. The light was still on inside. You could see the last tray on the counter. There was something about that scene, that warm light, the slow movement of someone turning off the window that made me think about endings. About things that last as long as they can. I don't know why I thought of that at that moment. Sometimes we feel something before we understand what it is. She always talks with her hands. It's a small thing. But when you really get to know someone, you learn to read those gestures like their own language. When she moves her right hand and closes her index finger against her thumb like that, she's getting to an important point. When she crosses her arms while talking, it's not defensiveness, it's concentration. She's gathering her thoughts. I learned this over the years, not on purpose. You don't learn these things on purpose. That night she was talking about her work, something about a meeting that didn't need to happen, about a colleague who didn't know how to listen. I was listening really. But there was something else happening in the background, quiet, that I couldn't switch off. It was the way the streetlights hit her profile when we passed underneath. It was the way her damp hair clung slightly to the nape of her neck. It was the sound of her footsteps on the asphalt, always a little heavier than mine. She was always like that, more grounded, as if she knew exactly where she was stepping. I couldn't name what I was feeling. And perhaps that was the problem or the beauty of it. When you don't yet have a name for something, it exists in a purer way. It hasn't yet been reduced to a word. She swerved around the crack in the sidewalk at the corner of Oak before I even remembered her. The two of us at the same time, without looking at each other. And I laughed a small laugh, almost inward, and she laughed too without asking why, because she knew. We always know when the reason is the same. There are moments that seem normal on the outside, but are irreversible on the inside. I didn't know yet that this was one of them. We continued walking. The conversation returned to simple things. She asked if I had eaten anything properly. I said I had eaten late, some canned soup, and she made that sound of affectionate disapproval that I know by heart, as if my eating habits were a shared responsibility. There's something very specific about being cared for by someone who doesn't need to do it. Someone who cares because they want to. I looked ahead at the long, damp street stretching out before us and tried not to think about it too much. There's something the body does before the mind understands. A kind of anticipation that doesn't ask permission. That night I felt it several times, and each time I felt it, I tried to attribute it to something else. Cold, tiredness, the long week. At one point she brushed against my shoulder. It was fleeting. She was dodging a dog that ran across the sidewalk, pulled by a small child. The contact lasted less than a second. But I felt the warmth of her arm through my jacket, and my breathing changed, not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone could notice, but I noticed. You always notice when your own breathing changes. I kept walking. She continued talking about the dog being too big for that child to handle, and I said yes and wow at the right moments, but a part of me had remained stuck in that second of the bump. Spinning, trying to understand what that had been. It wasn't new for her to touch me. We hug. We sit close. She sometimes takes my hand when she wants to show me something on her phone. These touches have always been normal. It's always simply been us. But that night there was something different in the air, or in me, that made everything seem more intense. I tried to focus on the walk. On the noise of the cars passing on the parallel avenue. On the music coming from a bar we were passing. On anything that would bring me back to the outside world, outside of myself. It didn't work very well. Because then she slowed her pace. She fell a little behind. And when I looked to the side, she was looking at me with that expression that I never quite know how to interpret. Her eyes a little wider. The corner of her mouth slightly raised. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. "Just tired." She nodded, but she didn't seem entirely convinced. We returned to the same rhythm. Our steps aligned again without either of us making an effort, as they always do. And I thought, what a strange thing the body is. It holds memories that the mind hasn't yet processed. It responds to presences before reason has even gotten to the point. That night, mine was telling me something, and I still wasn't ready to listen. We hadn't planned to stop anywhere. It was just a walk. It's often like that, no defined destination, letting our feet decide. But when we passed by Morrison's little square, she stopped. He said nothing. He simply walked toward the wooden bench in the corner, near the large oak tree. The bench we'd sat on before, not a specific time I could name, but I had the memory of the place in my body, the rough texture of the wood, the lightness of being there without needing to go anywhere. I followed her without asking. We sat down. She pulled her knees to her chest, hugged her own legs. I kept my feet on the ground, my hands in my pockets. The oak tree swayed slightly above us. A leaf fell into the space between us, October doing what October does best. "You don't have to say anything," she said. It wasn't a question, it was an offer. I turned to her. "What did you mean by that?" "You're here, but you're somewhere else," she said, without drama. "Just honesty. And that's okay. You can be in both places. Some people see you too much. It's scary, and it's one of the most beautiful things that can happen." We were silent for a while. The neighborhood continued around us, a couple walking by with grocery bags, a lit window on the second floor of the building across the street, the distant sound of a siren fading away. And then she said, without looking at me, looking out onto the street, You know what's funny? I spent the whole day surrounded by people and felt completely alone. And now I'm here with you, barely even speaking properly. And it's the first time all day that I truly feel like I'm in the right place. She said it with such nonchalance that it completely disarmed me, as if it were simple, as if it were just an observation about the day. I looked at her, her profile against the dim light of the small square, the way she blinked slowly, still looking ahead. I hear you, I said. And it was the truest thing I could have said. But it wasn't everything I was feeling. It wasn't even half. We walked back after a while. I don't remember who got up first. I remember the sheet of paper was still on the bench when I left. There are details that memory chooses to retain without warning. The way back was quieter, not in an uncomfortable way. In a way that belonged to that moment, as if the conversation had reached a point where it didn't need more words. As if words would interrupt something. I walked and thought. I tried not to, but I thought. I was thinking about her phrase. The first time today that I feel like I'm in the right place. And I thought about how that phrase had landed on me in a strange way, not just as a friend's affection. Not just as that simple pleasure of being important to someone. It was something else. One thing I recognized because I'd felt it before, but never with her. There's a difference between liking someone and needing their presence. There's a difference between feeling affection and feeling that a specific person occupies a space that isn't interchangeable. That if they weren't there, no one else could be. I was realizing on that sidewalk that what I felt for her no longer fit into the category I had created for it. It wasn't a dramatic thought. It wasn't a revelation with music. It was more like looking at a room you know by heart and realizing that the furniture arrangement was different from what you had imagined. That you had spent too much time looking at what you thought was there. She mentioned wanting to have tea when she got home. I said that sounded good. My voice came out normal. That surprised me. Because inside I was in the midst of one of those silent realizations that change something forever. The kind you can't undo. The kind that doesn't come back. We don't make choices in those moments, we just perceive them. And perception is irrevocable. She kept talking about the tea chamomile or mint. She was undecided. And I listened. And I answered. And I walked beside her the remaining 3 blocks as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. I don't know if she was feeling the same way. I don't know if her silence was the same as mine. All I know is that when we got to the corner where we always part ways, I didn't want to get there. We stopped at the corner, as always. The wind blew harder that 2nd October unapologetically. She turned to me. And there was a moment before she spoke, just a second when neither of us said anything. When we looked at each other in a way that wasn't entirely new, but had something added to it. A layer that wasn't there before. Or maybe it was, and I just never really looked at it properly. It was good, she said. Thank you for leaving. You were the one who called, I said. I know. She smiled slightly. But you could have said no. I would never say no to you. That's what I thought. That's not what I said. I needed that too, he said. She nodded, but she didn't move to leave. And neither did I. There's a specific kind of pause between two people that's neither discomfort nor distraction. It's the opposite. It's when both know exactly where they are, with exactly who they're with, and neither can figure out what to do about it. Someone's dog barked inside a house. A window lit up on the 2nd floor across the street. The world continued happening around us. And we stood there on the corner. She said, "You're different tonight." My heart did something small and involuntary. Different how? I don't know. She frowned slightly, as if searching for the right word. More present. And more distant at the same time. I almost said something true. I felt the sentence forming. the words organizing themselves inside me with frightening clarity. It reached my throat, and then her phone vibrated. She looked. "My mother," she said, with an apologetic smile. "Go," I said. She answered. She took 2 steps toward her house. She glanced back once, her eyes meeting mine for a second, her hand making a wave goodbye gesture as she spoke on the phone, and he left. I stood on the corner longer than I should have. The cold returned when she disappeared around the corner, as if her presence warmed the air around her. Or maybe it was just that I only felt the cold when I was alone. I couldn't sleep properly that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling of my room, with the window slightly open because that's how I always sleep, the cool October air slowly creeping in, the distant sounds of the city outside. Normally this calms me. That night it fueled the silence. I kept thinking about the phrase I didn't say on the street corner. It reached my throat. I know exactly what it would be like. Not the precise words, I never know the precise words before I say them, but the outline of the feeling. Its intensity. What would happen if I let it go? And when her phone vibrated, I felt relief and disappointment in the same second. That disturbed me more than anything else that night. Because relief means I was afraid, and disappointment means I wanted it anyway. I picked up my phone about 3 times for no reason. I put it back. I thought about texting to say I was awake, just to have some contact. I didn't. That wasn't what I needed, or maybe it was, but not in the way a text message could solve. There was a photo in our work group chat, sent by someone from some event or other. I clicked on her name at the top of the conversation. I went to her profile. I stared at her photo for longer than I needed to. Then I closed it. I felt ridiculous. But the ridicule didn't undo anything. The problem with feelings we try to ignore is that they don't stay quiet. They remain there, taking up space, breathing in the dark, waiting for you to decide what to do with them. I remembered when we met. At a gathering of friends, in a small apartment in the southeast of the city, where someone had put on a playlist that no one had asked for. She was near the window. I don't remember what she said first. I remember listening and thinking, this person is real in a way that I'm not used to. I never imagined that that thought would come back to haunt me years later. The window creaked in the wind. I turned to the side. I closed my eyes with a determination that had little to do with sleepiness. There was something I needed to decide. It wasn't about her, it was about me. About how much I was willing to look at what I was feeling. And how much I could still pretend I wasn't. The following days were normal. That's the kind of thing that weighs most heavily, not when we do something dramatic to distance ourselves, but when we simply let daily life create distance on its own. She texted me on Thursday asking to have lunch. I told her I had a meeting at that time. That was true, but I could have left earlier. I didn't. She was at an event with other friends over the weekend. She tagged me in a photo. I liked it. I didn't comment. I didn't go. It wasn't active avoidance. It was simply not making an effort to be present. It's the quieter version of withdrawal, and therefore the easiest to ignore. You don't need to justify it to anyone, not even to yourself. You were busy. You were tired. It was a long week. The problem is that I knew what I was doing. There was a discomfort inside me that I didn't know how to manage, and the simplest way to avoid dealing with it was to avoid creating the situations where it appeared, which were basically all the situations that involved her. But absence has its own weight. I woke up on a Tuesday and realized that we hadn't really spoken properly for 5 days. Not 5 days by accident or because of the rush of things. 5 days of small, consecutive choices that, added together, created exactly that distance. She didn't pressure me. That relieved me and hurt me. Because she knows me well enough not to pressure me when I'm quiet. She knows that when I disappear for a bit, I need space to come back on my own. I've always been like this, and she's learned it. What she didn't know, what I didn't quite know yet, was that this time I wasn't processing something about myself. I was processing something about us. And I wasn't sure if I'd come back the same way. On the 5th day, she sent a simple message. I hope you are well. 4 words. No charge. No dramatic question mark. I stared at that sentence for far too long. I am not well, I thought. I miss you in a way I shouldn't. Reply. Thank you. I am. It was a tough week. She sent a heart emoji. A small one. The kind she uses when she doesn't want to make things seem bigger than they are. I put the phone down. And I sat there in the silence that I myself had created. There's one thing nobody tells you about drifting apart from someone you like. The person won't actually go away. You cut off direct contact. You let the days go by. You fill the time with other things, work, the gym, series you never finish, conversations with other people that lead nowhere. You create structure around the empty space. And yet, the absence is still there. One Saturday morning I was making coffee and the song that came on the radio was the one she likes. I didn't know that I knew she liked it. But I knew immediately without thinking. One Sunday afternoon I drove past Morrison Square and glanced at the oak tree bench without meaning to. It was empty. October had stripped the tree of almost all its leaves. The leaf that had fallen between us that night had been lying on the ground somewhere for a long time, already mixed in with the others, unrecognizable. One day at work, someone used an expression she often uses, and I smiled before I realized I was smiling. Memory doesn't respect the effort of forgetting. It appears in corners, in smells, in small coincidences that aren't coincidences at all. They're just life happening in a world where that person existed, close to you long enough to be present in everything. I tried to analyze what I was feeling in a clinical way, as if I could create distance between myself and the feeling if I examined it coldly. It's pure admiration. It's the attachment of a long friendship. It's the emotional turmoil of a difficult week. None of those explanations made sense. Because it wasn't anything like that, and I knew it. One night I opened her chat and read our conversation from the beginning. Not the recent one, the oldest one from the early years. I read and recognized in each message the trace of someone who had been occupying a space in my heart in such a gradual way that I had never noticed when she crossed the line between important person and irreplaceable person. There is no exact moment. It's a process of building. And before you know it, you're already in. I closed my phone. I put it in the dresser drawer, not the nightstand, but the drawer where I would need to make a minimal effort to get it back. I lay down. I kept staring at the ceiling. And I thought, how much longer can I pretend this will pass if I wait long enough? It was my coworker who mentioned her name first. The two vaguely know each other. They crossed paths at some event I organized months ago. My colleague was talking about a new restaurant that had opened in the Pearl District, and said, I think that friend of yours, the one with the short hair, was there over the weekend. I felt it before I processed it. A kind of internal acceleration that I didn't ask for. Did she mention the place to you? I asked, casual, normal. No, I saw it in a story. But I deleted it by accident. Why, weren't you there? No, I said. And I went back to what I was doing. But I didn't go back, really. I kept thinking about that restaurant I hadn't been to, about that weekend that passed while I was distancing myself, about that version of her that was there without me, laughing, eating, existing in the world with the same lightness as always. Without needing me for that. That should have relieved me. It proved she was okay. It proved the universe didn't fall apart when I wasn't around. It didn't ease up. That week I started noticing the signs. Not by choice, they just appeared. The name of the cafe she frequents on a sign I drove past. A playlist and app generated for me with songs I associated with nights with her. A message from a mutual friend asking if we were going to Jess's birthday party next Saturday. Jess's birthday. Of course she was going to be there. I kept the invitation on my phone for 2 days. On the third day, I confirmed my attendance. I wasn't convinced it was the right thing to do. I only realized that not going would be just as intentional a choice as going, and that I had spent too much time making choices based on avoiding something. That night, before going to sleep, my body felt different. A kind of anticipation that wasn't quite anxiety. It was more like when you're at the beginning of a song you recognize, when the first notes play and you don't yet know what you're going to feel. But you know you're going to feel something. The room was cold. I left it like that. Sometimes the cold helps to keep thoughts clearer. This time it didn't help. Jess's apartment was small, the way birthday apartments usually are, too crowded. Music at just the right volume for conversations to happen over the top. That slightly orange light that every apartment with candles has. I arrived at the right time, which is always a little too late to be the first and early enough that the atmosphere was still forming. She was near the window. Of course it was. She always stands near the windows at parties. I knew that. She likes having the option of looking outside when the conversation gets heavy. A visual escape, she once said. I saw her before she saw me. There was a second like that. She was listening to someone talk, a glass in her hand. Her hair a little different, shorter. She must have cut it. She was wearing a navy blue blouse that I had never seen before. When she turned and met me, something in her face changed. Not dramatically. A slight relaxation, almost imperceptible. Like when a muscle relaxes. She walked towards me. You came, she said. I came, I said. It was the simplest exchange possible. And it carried more weight than either of them was prepared to name. We stayed in the same orbit during the party, not glued together, not avoiding each other. The natural distance of two people who know each other well and don't need to pretend. But I was aware of her the whole time. Of her position in the room. Of the moment she laughed at something someone said. Of the second she looked at her phone and then put it back in her pocket without answering anyone. Later, near the kitchen, we were alone for a few minutes while the other people moved into the living room. She said, You disappeared for a while. I know, I said. It was unintentional. She looked at me. That look I know, the one that doesn't accuse, that only observes. Accidentally? I opened my mouth. I closed it. Not entirely, I admitted. She nodded slowly. As if that half-truth was enough for now. As if she knew the rest would come when it came. It's okay, she said. And it wasn't just about the disappearance. It was about everything that hadn't been said yet. I looked at her. The navy blue blouse. The eyes that know me too well. I needed to understand one thing. I said. Did you understand? The conversation got to a point where the crowded apartment couldn't hold anymore. And when Jess went to cut the cake, we simply left together without either of us saying anything. Let's go. We stood on the sidewalk outside. The night was colder than October-November, arriving without warning. We didn't go anywhere. We just stood near the door of her building, the muffled noise of the party upstairs reaching us whenever someone opened a window. She asked what I needed to understand. I remained silent for a while. The kind of silence she knows how to respect. When you said you felt safe with me, I began slowly. I stayed quiet because I didn't know what to say. And I spent weeks trying to understand why things had gotten to this point. She was listening to me, motionless, her eyes fixed on mine. Where did you get to? She asked in a low voice. Here it was. The phrase that had been stuck in my throat on the corner of Oak Street, weeks ago. The one I had carried for 5 days' distance, for nights staring at the ceiling, for a birthday I almost didn't go to. In the place where I realize I no longer know if what I feel for you fits within what I used to call friendship. The world didn't stop, The stars didn't rearrange themselves. The party up there went on. Someone laughed above us. She stared at me for a second that felt much longer than a second. And then she said something too quietly for me to be sure of the exact words. But I saw the way she said it, and I knew, not everything. Not what comes next, nor where this will lead, nor whether either of them has enough courage for the next step. But I knew that phrase hadn't reached me by chance. When she said she felt safe by my side, perhaps she didn't fully know what she was saying. We remained silent for a while. The kind of silence that no longer weighs you down. The kind that simply exists warm between two people who are finally looking at the same thing at the same time. She slowly extended her hand. His fingers found mine. It wasn't a gesture of response. It was a question, and I didn't answer with words. I closed my fingers around hers. And so we remained not knowing what came next, not needing to know yet. Just there. On the cold November sidewalk. With the echo of that October night that started it all. Still alive. Still warming. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button. Not out of habit, because it deserves to exist. And subscribe to the Another Flame channel right now, because I bring incredible stories like this one every day and you can't miss the brand new series I'll be bringing in the next videos. If that feeling is still with you when you close your eyes tonight, the next video will tell you what to do with it. It starts exactly where that feeling resides.